June 24, 2009, Staples Center, Los Angeles. Michael Jackson was rehearsing for the comeback that was supposed to return him to the stage. The next day, he would be dead. The concert never opened, but the final rehearsal was filmed. This is not the internet version of Michael Jackson's final hours. It is the documented timeline, reconstructed from rehearsal accounts, witness testimony, emergency records, the coroner's findings, and the trial that followed. What happened in between is the story. In 2009, Michael Jackson was preparing to return to the stage. In 1984, he'd already won 8 Grammy Awards in a single night, a record that stood for decades. By 2009, the question wasn't whether he had once been great. It was whether he still could be. For decades, he had been known as the King of Pop. But by this point, the public was asking a different question. Could Michael Jackson still perform? Could he still carry an entire concert? Could the man who had once filled stadiums still become the center of the stage? The planned concerts in London were being promoted as a major comeback, a chance to step back into the spotlight after years of legal controversy, health speculation, and intense media attention. When Jackson announced the shows at London's O2 Arena on March 5th, the plan was for 10 concerts. Within a week, promoters expanded it to 50. Roughly 750,000 tickets sold in about 4 hours. The demand was never in question. The only question was whether Jackson himself could sustain 50 nights of a production built at that scale, night after night, for the better part of a year. Those rehearsals weren't private practice sessions. They involved dancers, musicians, and an entire production staff, and everything had to work. The timing, the staging, the music, the choreography, and Michael Jackson himself. The world thought it was waiting for a concert. In reality, it was waiting to see whether Michael Jackson could become Michael Jackson again. On the nights of June 23rd and June 24th, Michael Jackson rehearsed at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. The footage later released in This Is It showed a performer still capable of commanding a stage, moving through the songs that had defined his career, working with the dancers, adjusting the lighting and the timing. The footage is powerful because it shows both sides of the comeback. There was the legend, the voice, the movement, the attention to detail. But it also showed a production still being assembled. The show wasn't finished. And according to testimony later presented in court, there had been concerns about whether Jackson was physically ready for what the production demanded. Some witnesses described missed rehearsals. Others described him performing strongly enough to reassure the people around him. Both things can be true. That is part of why the footage is so difficult to watch. It does not look like a farewell. It looks like preparation. The pressure behind that preparation was enormous. Jackson was expected to deliver the precision of his past while performing in the present. Every missed rehearsal, a potential headline. Every rumor about his health spreading in minutes. He had spent his entire life being watched. As a child, by audiences. As an adult, by cameras. By 2009, even his private struggles had become public entertainment. By the time the O2 dates were announced, Jackson had spent more than 3 decades as one of the most photographed people on the planet. Some of that scrutiny was fair. Much of it was not. All of it followed him into rehearsal. The people in that room believed they were watching the beginning of the comeback. In hindsight, they were watching Michael Jackson's final completed night on stage. The rehearsal footage can show us what happened on stage. It cannot show us what was happening behind closed doors. One of the central issues in the case was Michael Jackson's struggle with sleep. According to testimony presented during the trial, Jackson had been relying on medication to rest. The medical details matter because the drugs involved were not simply ordinary sleep aids. Propofol is a powerful anesthetic used in medical settings. It can cause unconsciousness, but that is not the same thing as normal, restorative sleep. Under proper medical conditions, powerful anesthetics require careful monitoring. Breathing, heart rate, oxygen levels, and the patient's overall condition. The court heard testimony about the use of propofol in Jackson's home and about the medical decisions made during the final night. This is where the story needs to be handled carefully. There is a difference between saying what the evidence established and suggesting what cannot be proven. The official investigation did not establish that Michael Jackson was killed by a secret organization or that he disappeared voluntarily. The coroner determined that his death was caused by acute propofol intoxication, with a contributory effect from benzodiazepine sedatives also administered that night. The death was classified as a homicide. And in 2011, Dr. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in connection with Jackson's death. Those are the established facts. The larger question is how the timeline unfolded. Stories about music legends are often reduced to one headline, but the details usually tell a much more complicated story. If you want more carefully researched stories from behind the headlines, hit subscribe. On the morning of June 25th, Michael Jackson was at his rented home in Los Angeles. According to the trial timeline, Dr. Conrad Murray had been providing medical care to Jackson through the night. Multiple medications had already been administered, but Jackson still struggled to sleep. By mid-morning, propofol was administered. Downstairs, Jackson's personal chef, Kai Chase, was preparing lunch. She would later testify that Jackson had seemed happy and healthy just hours earlier. Around 12:05 that afternoon, Murray ran downstairs, calling for her to get Jackson's son, Prince, to get help, to get security. He did not ask her to call 911. The timeline presented in court showed that Murray later said he found Jackson unresponsive and not breathing shortly before noon. That moment became the center of the investigation. What happened next? Who was contacted? How much time passed before emergency services were called? According to the timeline presented during the trial, Dr. Murray said he found Michael Jackson unresponsive at approximately 11:56 a.m. The 911 call was placed around 12:20 p.m., leaving approximately 24 minutes between those reported events. When someone is found unresponsive and not breathing, every minute matters. That gap was not a detail the public or the jury could easily set aside. Paramedics arrived and began attempting to revive Jackson. He was transported to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. But the efforts to save him were unsuccessful. Michael Jackson was pronounced dead on June 25, 2009. He was 50 years old. Within hours, the news reached every corner of the world. Fans gathered outside the hospital. Television networks interrupted regular programming. A private medical emergency became one of the most watched events in modern entertainment history. The investigation was just beginning. The Los Angeles County coroner determined that Jackson died from acute propofol intoxication, with other sedatives listed as contributing factors. The manner of death was classified as homicide. That classification did not mean a stranger had attacked Jackson. It meant the death resulted from the actions of another person. In everyday language, homicide can sound like deliberate murder. But legally and medically, it can include a death caused by another person's actions, including negligent medical care. The trial examined the drugs, the monitoring, the timeline, and the decisions made inside the house. Jackson's head of security, Alberto Alvarez, testified that he found Murray performing chest compressions and that before paramedics arrived, Murray had him gather medication vials and place a pulse oximeter on Jackson's finger. Alvarez did not tell investigators about the vials until 2 months later. Not because any single account was necessarily false, but because the full picture only came together piece by piece, months after the fact. In November of 2011, a jury found Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years. Separate what actually happened into 3 categories: documented fact, the cause of death, the medication findings, and Murray's conviction. Witness testimony, accounts from the people who were there, some consistent, some contradictory. And what was never proven: claims of a larger conspiracy, claims that Jackson faked his death, claims built on unverified photographs. The tragedy does not require a conspiracy to be shocking. The documented facts are already difficult enough. Michael Jackson's legacy was already complicated before June 25, 2009. He was, at once, one of the most influential entertainers in history and one of the most scrutinized private lives in modern celebrity culture. The final rehearsals do not resolve that complexity. They simply show one more layer of it. A 50-year-old man, still capable of extraordinary performance, still working to get every detail right. In the last days, before an ending, nobody in that room saw coming. His life had already become larger than the music. But in those final rehearsals, the focus returned to the thing he understood best: the stage, the music, the performance, and the audience waiting on the other side of the lights. Michael Jackson's story did not end because he stopped being talented. It ended while he was still trying to meet the impossible expectations attached to his name. The comeback never happened. The concerts never opened. But the final rehearsal remained, a record of what Michael Jackson could still do. He did not leave behind only a mysterious final night. He left behind a record of extraordinary talent and a comeback that ended while he was still preparing for the future. This has been the Icon Files. If you value carefully researched stories about the moments music history almost forgot, hit subscribe. The next story is already waiting.